audited if it's performing to certain standards, and the auditor's office having some say over that, you know, to look at the charter schools, how they're funded, where the money goes. How do you feel about that? What's your stance on charter schools?
Well, I've always been a supporter of school choice. I think competition is good in politics, competition's good in education, it's good in the news industry. Competition makes us better. Now, that being said, I'm for accountability for everybody. My friends and people that aren't my friends, and nobody has been more aggressive on charter schools than Dave Yost. The fact of the matter is, more than half of our findings for recovery that we've issued in the last 4 years have been against charter schools. That's all governments. That's the state government spending $62 billion biennium. That's all the county courthouses. That's all the city halls and the traditional school districts. Half of the findings have been against charter schools. Of the 80 plus public officials who have been convicted of criminal offenses, 22 of them are charter school people, charter school officials. So the notion that I have not been aggressive and vigilant simply won't wash with the facts. Now, in addition to that, I'd like to point out that the experiment with charter schools started in the late 90s after a very acrimonious debate. There was a lot of pushback from the education establishment back then, and they didn't want to see charter schools in Ohio. Now today, I think the debate has shifted. Today, I think everybody says good charter schools are good for the kids. And the question is, how do we make sure that charter schools perform as they ought to? Now, I'm no education expert, and I'm not here to suggest to you that I know how to make a poorly performing charter school academically be better, but I am an expert in governance and in legal compliance and oversight. That's our bailiwick. And what I've concluded after 4 years of working on this is that Ohio's structure is inadequate for proper oversight. I think this stems from the political fights at the birth of the charter school operation here in Ohio. Predictably, I think the people that passed that law didn't trust the folks that were in ODE that had opposed the creation of charter schools. I mean, if you tell me I don't like charter schools, then when I create them, I'm hardly going to ask you to be the supervisor of them, right? So we have this very diverse and really kind of disorganized supervisory structure. How many of you remember there was a lady in New York, I think it was back in the 60s, Giovanni or something like that. She was raped and killed in a courtyard surrounded by hundreds of people in the apartments, all of whom saw the murder. But nobody called the police. And the social scientists call this diffusion of responsibility. Well, that's what we've got right now in the charter schools. We've got boards, but we've got sponsors, but we've got authorizers, but we've got ODE. And when you go to look and say, well, who's supposed to make sure this works? Everybody's doing this. We've got a diffusion of responsibility. When nobody owns a problem, or when everybody owns a problem, then nobody owns it. So in the next session of the legislature, I will, by that time, have completed a couple of pieces of work that we're doing right now, performance audit at the Ohio Department of Education, and a special audit on a number of sponsors that had failed first-year schools. And that, combined with the rest of the experience I've had over 4 years, I think is going to allow me to offer some very useful insight to the legislature on reviewing and revising and improving the structure of accountability here in Ohio.
I think talking with local school board members and superintendents, they feel between funding, Common Core, standardized testing, all that, that the deck is stacked against the local public schools now. I think they just want some accountability at least, where they're losing money to charter schools, where students are leaving, and I think they want that accountability. They want the accountability for those schools that they're expected to have.
And how money flows is a choice of the General Assembly. The auditor doesn't get to decide that. Money's appropriated by the General Assembly. The auditor's job is to make sure that what the General Assembly appropriates is the way the money actually goes. But my opponent keeps making these arguments about things that are properly in the province of the legislature. I think that he might be a great service to Ohio if he stayed in the legislature and continued to pursue his goals.
Okay.
What have you done in the last, during your term to demonstrate your commitment to open records and open?
I'm a former, I think most of you know this, I'm a former newspaper reporter for the old Citizen Journal, the Scripps paper here in Columbus years ago. As a former journalist, as well as somebody who just has always believed in government accountability, I am hugely focused on public records. We have a person who's dedicated in my office to responding to public records requests so that my office is not tardy or non-compliant. And that includes things that feel pretty invasive. For a while, the Democratic Party was asking for my calendar from the beginning of my term to the present every month or two. And that felt kind of targeted, but you know what? The law is the law, and it's public record. So you know what we did? We gave them public records. It's not hard. We have instituted a review that we do every year. We have a sample of local governments that we go in and check on their public records responses and their compliance with the law. When a government fails that, we have them on the list for the following year, and most of them, once they get called out once, are quick to try to fix it. But we cooperate. We conduct educational sessions for local government officers on how open records and open meetings work, and so we work hard to make sure that not only we're compliant, but the locals are compliant. Let me turn for just a moment to my opponent, who, under the law, and if you support the law that says you're allowed to have the records, you also have to support the other provisions logically. Would you agree with me? You don't pick and choose among provisions of the law. He's required to either attend a public records training session of 3 hours by law every term, or to designate a staff member to do it for him, who would then be able to respond intelligently to what the law requires. This goes back to the things that I've heard from the Ohio Newspaper Association regularly, that sometimes people are stonewalling, but sometimes they just don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They don't know what the law says. They want to know your identity, or they want to put some other burden on it. My opponent didn't do it. We cited him in the legislature management letter for failing in his last term to complete his required public records training. Now, it seems to me that if you're committed to open government and transparency, the very least, the threshold act needs to be to comply with the law. Don't look at what they say. Look at what they do.
I think we're coming up on the end of our time. Anything else? All right.
Thank you.
We appreciate